Just to let you guys know too, that we can hear you message was for another, it was for another session, so we're good.
That's good.
Yeah, I get messages for all of them, so it was just like, who can hear us? What? But yeah, it was not us, so we're good.
Thank you, Heidi.
No problem. Also, just to let you guys know, if you are getting any feedback between each other, the easiest way to change it is the device switcher, the input, just like toggle down to one of the other microphones. So,
Okay. Does it sound okay now?
Yeah, it sounds okay now. And
Okay.
I'm sure that you guys are fine. I just, since Danielle just joined, I don't know if she's planning on talking, but just in case, because it's happened to us, but
Okay.
yeah, it's
Okay.
really easy.
Thanks.
No problem.
Thank you. We'll get started here in a minute for everyone just joining, and go ahead and put any introductions in the chat if you would like. It looks like we've got a pretty good amount of people now, so we could go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're really grateful that you're all here and chose to listen to us today. My name is Kelli Williams. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm currently living and working on the traditional lands of the Ohlone community and would like to thank them for their stewardship of the land. I'm working in the Tribal Clean Water section at EPA, and I've been here for about 2 years now. Today, my co-presenter Sofia and I will be going over 3 different funding opportunities available for tribal surface waters within Region 9. We'll be covering Clean Water Act 106, Clean Water Act 319, and the Wetlands Program. Please use the chat function at any time. We'll be monitoring it, and we'll take all the questions at the end. Sofia is going to be starting us off today, so I'll pass it over to her.
Thank you, Kelly, and hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sofia Sotomayor. I use the pronoun she, her, and I also work in the Tribal Clean Water section with Kelly. So I've been here for a little bit over a year. And I am here today working and living on the traditional lands of the Tongva, and I'm very thankful to be here. So let's get started. The first program I'm going to talk about today is the Water Pollution Control Grant Program, also known as the Clean Water Act Section 106. And this authorizes EPA to provide financial assistance to states and tribes that have obtained treatment in a similar manner to a state. So this program is designed to control, prevent, and eliminate water pollution, as well as to educate tribal members and the general public. So the annual funding amounts for 106 typically range from $40,000 to $200,000, and first-time eligible applicants will receive at least $40,000. Factors like past performance of grant, unliquidated funding amount, the allocation that we receive, and how many funding requests we receive are a couple examples of what affects the funding amount that is awarded. The non-federal match required is 5%. But a class exemption was put into effect on October 1st of 2021 and will reduce the match to 0% if 106 is in a PPG. So this new waiver is going to apply to any PPG awarded on or after October 1st. So that will include any PPGs in the upcoming fiscal year. It will all be 0%. And this is both for water-only PPGs and multimedia PPGs. So Region 9's FY 2021 allocation for 106 was approximately $8.9 million. And this chart here shows the total national 106 allocation over the past 15 years. A portion of 106 funds is set aside and allocated to EPA regional offices to make allotments for eligible tribes. And as you may notice, even though the amount of funding from Congress has stayed relatively the same, the number of TIS eligible tribes has increased. So Section 106 grants can support a wide variety of water pollution prevention and control programs and activities. At the core, it includes monitoring and assessing water quality and the associated data management, and then reporting on water quality assessments and identifying your impaired waters. And the basis of any successful program always starts with qualified staff to identify and prioritize water quality issues. Here are some staff members from Owens Valley Indian Water Commission, and they're working on taking some water quality samples with field instruments. And here's another example from 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians collecting and testing water quality monitoring samples along the Colorado River. Monitoring can also include bioassessments. So here's some macroinvertebrate sampling being conducted along the Colorado River, which was taken during a Clean Water Act workshop. So 106 funds are also commonly used to cover training and educational outreach to tribal members. Here's a community outreach program from courtesy of 29 Palms. Some more eligible activities include developing and implementing groundwater or Nonpoint source management programs, and then attending trainings, workshops, and other events to build and share technical knowledge. Also developing tribal water quality standards. So this list that I've gone over so far is not inclusive, but it just kind of serves as some common work plan activities for 106. And this picture is courtesy of Pitt River Tribe. So whichever 106 activities that you choose to include will be specified in a detailed work plan and budget that will outline how the funds will be used. So here's an example of an organized work plan that shows the tasks with different milestones and environmental results. like the completion dates for each of those tasks, deliverables to be submitted. So like an example would be like a summary of trainings, and then the estimated cost for each task. And then there's a few additional requirements that must be submitted to your project officer for 106. And these are the three here. So it's the quality assurance project plan, the water quality assessment report, and then you need to submit your data in a WQX compatible format. And this was formerly STORET, which no longer exists. So there will be a session later today at 3 p.m. that goes over these three reporting requirements in a little bit more depth and some tools to assist in submitting if you have like further questions. And if you're not able to attend that, there will be a recording available afterwards. So this is the schedule for FY22 106 funds. The date for tribes to submit new 106 FAE applications is October 29th. And then the deadline for draft work plans and proposed budgets to be submitted to your project officer is anticipated for February 1st. But if your funding is included in a multimedia PPG, just double check with your project officer for more information about that submission deadline, because gaps can sometimes have earlier submission dates. And then the final grant application will be submitted to grants.gov in spring of 2022. So as you likely know, EPA is in the process of updating the final guidance on awards to grants to Indian tribes under Section 106. So the timeline so far of this has been that the notification of consultation and coordination for the guidance was sent out earlier this year in January, and there was a comment period for that. And then there was a call for tribal volunteers to be a part of a sub-work group in April, and there were 25 different slots for that. So at least one Region 9 tribal representative is in each of those sub-work groups. And upcoming, be on the lookout for the draft revised guidance in January 2022, and there will be another comment period for that. So we'll be sending out more information about that soon. And if you have a little bit more questions about the guidance revision, we'll also be going over this in the reporting requirements at 3 p.m. today. And our team lead will be on that call for the guidance revision if you have more questions. So if you have any questions about 106, you can reach out to Danielle Angelis or Kate Pinkerton, or if you are working with a project officer, that's always a good place to start. Now we will be discussing Clean Water Act Section 319, which is the Nonpoint Source Pollution Control Grant Program. So the funding for 319 grants are made in two different portions. First is a base funding amount that will be available to each eligible tribe. So for tribes whose land area exceeds 1,000 square miles, EPA provides $50,000, but for all other tribes, EPA will provide $30,000. And then second is funding available through a competitive process for on-ground implementation projects, which are designed to achieve water quality improvement. And each of these projects will receive up to $100,000 depending on demonstrated need. The project proposals for this competition will be reviewed by an EPA project review team that is composed of headquarters and regional staff. So the non-federal match for both of these competitive and base 319 programs is 40%. But if you can demonstrate financial hardship, then the match will be reduced to 10%. And again, as I mentioned for 106, the 0% match waiver now applies to all 319 funds that are included in a PPG, since October 1st. So this graph shows the number of eligible tribes for grants and the corresponding total funds awarded over the past 24 fiscal years. And again, as you may notice, the number of eligible tribes has increased while the tribal allocation has remained relatively the same. So before we dive any deeper into 319 program activities, let's first define what non-point source pollution, or also known as polluted runoff, is. So non-point source pollution is caused when diffuse sources of rainfall, snowmelt, or irrigation runs over land and then through the ground and picks up pollutants along the way, and then deposits those pollutants into rivers, lakes, oceans, where it can also then be introduced into groundwater. So this kind of cascade of effects here results in polluted runoff and can negatively impact water quality on your reservation lands. And now, does anyone have any examples of some major sources of non-point source pollution? If you have any ideas, you can go ahead and put it into the chat.
Heidi Brow says leaking septic tanks, which is a great one.
Yes. Great. So you can continue to put answers in the chat. But here are some major sources of non-point source pollution that occur in the Pacific Southwest. So this includes like agriculture, livestock grazing, forestry, hydromodification, roads and urban runoff, abandoned mines, failing septic systems, and construction activities. So non-point source pollution can come from a lot of different sources. And depending on which of these sources may be impacting your waters, you're going to want to implement best management practices and measures to combat them. So best management practices, or BMPs, are individual actions or structures that can be used alone or in combination to implement achievable measures that control the addition of pollutants to surface and groundwater. And it can be used, like these two terms can be used interchangeably. They both really aim at identifying the issue or source of non-point source pollution that we just went over, and then coming up with a solution to limit the input into water bodies. So here's an example of a best management practice of erosion control. And here we can see that we're going to install hay bales that will help intercept and retain small amounts of sediment and reduce erosion. Another example is low impact development. And these practices mimic natural processes that result in infiltration of stormwater and promote more natural movement of water within an ecosystem. So examples would be green space, permeable pavement, rain gardens, bioswales, and many more. And it really just helps to retain water and reduce runoff. And then exclusion fencing is another common best management practice, and it's often installed to keep out livestock from streams that aren't intended for grazing. So benefits of this can include reduced soil erosion, sedimentation, and then reduce pathogen contamination and pollution. And these are just like a couple examples, but obviously there's many more. So in summary, implementation of a tribe's non-point source management program really includes a range of activities. And this includes like best management practices in priority watersheds, education and outreach, pre and post water quality monitoring for non-point source pollution projects. And this is more for like before and after again, but not consistent monitoring. That should be used more for 106 base funds. And then the last one is like watershed-based plans development and implementation. So this is the FY 2022 schedule for 319 funds. For base funds and competitive funds, the date for tribes to be eligible and have their FAE applications in is October 8th. And then the deadline for submission materials is November 2021 for competitive, and then to submit all of your work plans and budgets for base is February 25th. And again, consult with your project officer if you're in a multimedia PPG for that. And then both of the grant applications will be submitted in spring of 2022. And then the Nonpoint Source Planning Handbook can assist in developing your Nonpoint Source program and determining eligible activities. Your PO is also a really great resource to turn to for more help. And then we also have a 319 lead within our section, Howard Kahan, and his contact information is here. So for first-time applicants for sections 319 and 106, you will need to obtain a treatment as in a similar manner as a state or financial assistance eligibility. These are used interchangeably. And you'll need to prepare an application and submit it to EPA Region 9. You can see the FAE eligibility handbook and checklist here, and that can assist in developing our application. And then Loretta Vanges is also a really great contact if you have any questions as a first-time applicant. And then if you are applying or if you are adding more lands to your TAS, then you will also have to amend your TAS application to submit to your project officer. And then these are the 4 requirements for your TAS application. So a tribe needs to be federally recognized. You need to show that you have an established governing body and that you're capable of managing a program. And then the last one is just that you have jurisdiction and authority over water resources. And if you have any more questions about TAS, we're also going to have a session that goes over FAE briefly tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So go ahead and sign up for that session. And now I'm going to hand it off to Kelli to talk about wetlands.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophia. Great job. I'll just quickly say we encourage you to put any questions you may have on any of the things we discussed in the chat. I'll just throw that out again. So I'll be discussing the Clean Water Act Section 104B3 Wetland Program Development Grant Program, which is also known as WPDGs or just Wetlands Grants. So funding, grants awards are typically range from from 50K to 500K with an automatic match of 25% unless it's put in a PPG. As Sophia discussed, after October 1st, there's a new match waiver that reduces any PPG fundings to 0%. The fiscal year 21 allocation was approximately 3.1 million, and of that, about 800,000 was awarded to tribes in Region 9. So I'll just put quickly a little poll out there so folks can answer. And I just asked if there's any wetlands in the area you currently work. So what is a wetland? It's an area with surface water for at least part of the year, hydraulic or wetland soils, and water-loving plants. For example, these can be seeps and springs, salt marshes, freshwater marshes, riparian corridors, or arroyos, playas or cienagas, vernal pools, and much more. If anyone has any examples, there you go. Feel free to drop them in the chat. Shown here is Cienega Creek Preserve in the state of Arizona. Next slide. So what are the Wetland Program Development Grants for? They're to build or refine a wetland program, to start up, to develop, to improve, to design, or revise. They are not for day-to-day implementation of a wetland program, such as implementation or continuing program work. And these funds can apply to all wetlands except for constructed wetlands for wastewater treatment. These provide eligible applicants an opportunity to conduct projects that promote the coordination and acceleration of research, investigations, experiments, trainings, demonstrations, reduction with the goal to reduce and eliminate water pollution. Next slide, please. And while each state and tribe has their own wetland goals, there is a common set of program objectives that comprise a comprehensive wetland program. EPA identifies 4 core elements that comprise and strengthen effective wetlands, which are monitoring and assessment, regulatory activities, including 401 certification, voluntary restoration and protection, and water quality standards for wetlands. Next slide. So here are just some examples of eligible activities. Something that's often done is developing a wetland program plan. Wetland program plans are useful documents for guiding and focusing efforts to build an effective wetland program. A wetland program plan can be concise information and identification of planned activities to help create a focused and a sustainable wetland program. You can also use them to create a wetland monitoring assessment program, to use existing wetlands data to assess priorities for wetland restoration and protection, to complete a wetland restoration demonstration project using new or experimental technologies or approaches, and then incorporating lessons learned into a new wetland program plan, or WPP. You could use these funds to train staff on how to monitor wetland condition and water quality associated. And of course, this is by no means a comprehensive list of all the activities, but just some examples to get you to start thinking about how you could utilize wetland program funding. Next slide, please. So for Wetlands Grants, they're available for tribes, states, and local governments. And I'll note for tribes that FAE or TAS is not a requirement. These are competitive funds that are awarded on a competitive basis, and they're awarded annually with a national competition and regional competition taking place every other year. The most recent competition took place this summer and was a regional competition, meaning next year, fiscal year 22, will be a national competition, which will probably take place this spring. Next slide. So there's 2 different ways folks can apply to the wetlands competition. It's either under track 1 or track 2. Everything under track 1 applies to track 2, but instead of just being available for tribes and states as track 1 is, local governments, interstate agencies, and intertribal consortia and state universities can also apply under track 2. The tribal 10% set aside, which is the national competition, began in 2017. And the RFA for the competition is usually posted for about 45 days. Your project officer should be in touch about updates and exact timing as that is decided. So far, the exact timing of the 2022 competition is not known yet. And for both competitions, national and regional, you'll have to decide if you want to apply under track 1 or track 2. And if you don't get selected for the competition, we highly recommend that you request a debrief and get some feedback and figure out how to improve your chances of getting selected next year or for the next competition. Next slide, please. So here's a general timeline of the competitions. So last year we had a regional wetland program development grant competition in 21. So the next one will be national. And we're expecting it to come out in spring 2022. But some of you may remember that the national competition for fiscal year 20 was delayed a bit. So that may happen again, we're not sure. Something to consider is if you will include your funding in a multimedia PPG, and that might affect the deadlines a little bit. And be in touch with your Clean Water Act project officer for that information. Next slide, please. Just going to wrap up with some tips on how to apply, some helpful tips, hopefully. Be sure to look carefully at the RFA, the request for application, when it's posted. They change slightly from year to year, but not drastically. And you can plan by looking at the previous year's RFA to get an idea of what you'll need to put in your application. Generally, the key information is located on the first two pages of the RFA, so read them thoroughly, and especially note the ineligible activity sections. You don't want to put activities in the application that you can't get funding to cover, and also the evaluation criteria. I'd also suggest you think about the audience as you're writing your grant proposal and make sure to tailor it to them. The first two evaluation criteria, project need and project tasks, carry the most points. So make sure to address everything as thoroughly and clearly as possible and focus on those two sections if you're going to focus on any. They have a suggested outline, and I highly suggest you follow that. It's a lot easier for the competition review panel to read through the applications and score it accordingly if you have the correct headers and follow the suggested outline. I will also note that if you're going to include the funding in a PPG, make sure to revise your budget detail accordingly, especially considering the new match waiver. And last but not least, as with all grants, be sure to pay attention to the deadlines of the program and give yourself plenty of time to apply via grants.gov. And here's just a couple links. These will be available after the presentation because the presentation will be posted. And if you want any specific links right now, we can drop that into the chat. So Sarvi Madhavi is the main contact for the wetlands program here at EPA. I, Kelli Williams, am the contact for tribal folks. So if there's anything specific, feel free to get in touch with me or Sarvi. And I think that's all we have for you today. We ran a little bit short, so happy to engage in some dialogue or answer any questions. Or if you want to just reach out to Sofia or myself directly, feel free to do that.
Yes, thank you, Kelli. We are both available and we can drop our contact information in the chat if you have questions about anything that we went over. As Kelli mentioned, the PowerPoint is posted in the session here, so you can access it under documents for all of those links and to reference anything we went over. So we can look in the chat for any questions. And yes, thank you, Jason, for mentioning. So the TAS session tomorrow morning at 9 that I referred to will be mostly focused on regulatory TAS. So that's why I said like it will briefly go over FAE, but we're here as resources. If you have any questions, please contact us or any other member of our team. Kelli, are you seeing any questions in the chat?
I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. And if folks want to move over to other sessions, that's totally okay. Sophia and I can stick around if people do want to ask any questions or just chat with us. And yes, Heidi, thank you. You can find our contact information under the people/attendee tabs.
Okay, well, Kelli and I we'll stick around till the end of the session. So if you think of any questions, we'll be here to have a discussion. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you, Heidi.
that's very interesting. So 72% of people that answered the poll have wetlands.
That's a lot of wetlands.
Yeah.
Well, Sophia, it looks like our attendee list is maybe thinning out a bit as folks move around. So we could go ahead and just end a bit early. And yeah, to anyone still on, we're always accessible.
Yes, we'll be available. And I think there's like a function where you can have a one-on-one meeting with somebody or something. So we're here if you if you want to reach out.
Yeah.
And thank you again, everyone, so much for attending.
And thank you, Heidi, for moderating for us.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. Okay, well, we'll stop the broadcast now then.